So you're saying more black people get abortion?
Yes. So I look
Okay,
at that.
why is that, white lady? White lady, why do more black people get abortion? Because abortions are based on what? Lack of access to resources. Because abortions disproportionately.
Why is he calling her white lady? Like that don't look like his niece. Listen here, black lady. Imagine me coming up to somebody saying, listen here, black lady. That sounds insane. That sounds absolutely mental. But let us continue.
Proportionally happen to impoverished people. Why are black people more impoverished than white people? Because of white supremacy. So thank you for pointing out that people that have been forced into poverty through systemic racism of the last 200 years are forced to abort their baby more because of the lack of resources to be able to raise.
Breathe, brother, breathe. Breathe. We're going to get through this together, okay? And don't worry, to the folks at home, we will indeed dissect this at a molecular subatomic level. But for now, breathe.
Raise a baby, and then you, as a white lady, use that as your talking point to take the health care away from those same women that are suffering in those same impoverished neighborhoods because you don't want to acknowledge the white supremacy behind it all. Go ahead.
Okay. That brother right there he's going to be on oxygen in the next few years. Just the trajectory that he's going. You know what I mean? That's a lot. That's a lot there. So yeah, dear white dude for Kamala. Here's the thing. Yes, black women disproportionately have more baby unaliving events than any other demographic. So let's use quote unquote white women as they're called on the census, as well as black as they're called on the census. Black woman is 4 times more likely to unalive her child than a white woman. Now, the easiest explanation for this is to say, well, you know, obviously it is history that has created for where we now are. Surely it must be the fact that this group of people, you know, were disproportionately marginalized, were basically undervalued and seen as essentially less than human in certain points in American history, etc. That would be the easiest sort of scapegoat. But here's the thing, and this ties into an even larger conversation of the broken households, etc., is within the African American or Black American population prior to the 1960s, the marriage rates were upwards to 85%, meaning that 85% of children in a black neighborhood or a black environment, majority black environment, would be raised with 2 parents in the household. This is in the midst of Jim Crow, right? This is in the midst of blatant systemic racism that was enforced by the Democratic Party. So we have the family being intact, which therefore meant a more stable household, which therefore meant that there was a higher capability of being able to take care of children, etc. Fast forward to today, and we have the 4-to-1 ratio going on, right? For every 4 baby unalivings that a black woman will have, a white woman will have 1, which is insane when you look at per capita, which is always necessary to point out, which is to say that black folk are about 13% of the population, 13.5, we just say 14 to round it off. And I believe white folks are still around 50 to 60% of the population. So break that down even more so to just women. Okay, fantastic. So why is there disproportionate, baby unalivings? Well, because there is a culture that has essentially adopted the idea that this is normal. It is something to do. I know we don't want to have this. Well, you probably want to have the conversation if you're an honest individual who genuinely wants truth. But if you're somebody who is just fully subscribed to the Democratic plantation and all its ideology, and you're just given over to essentially the program, you would likely hate to hear the fact that it is a problem of culture. Culture is this, it's like culture medium, right? Like when they're doing blood tests and things of that nature, they call it the culture medium to see what components make up the blood per se. So your culture is what makes up that environment. What are the customs? What are the norms? What are the value systems, etc.? Those accumulate to make culture, right? There's an external culture, which is the things that you show to display, represent yourself. And then there's the internalized culture, which is the mindset, that the temperament, the emotional and mental defaults within that space and that environment. And it's not to say that some don't break away and some don't, find their own individuality, which I believe is supposed to be our overarching goal as human beings, is to surpass or get past or evolve past this need to always be tied or tethered to some sort of culture in order for us to have significance or an identity, right? But I digress. So we have a culture that has made it okay, not just like violent acts are normalized within the said quote unquote modern day promoted Black culture, right? So that's a subconscious cue. Life is devalued in essence. Then we have a culture that values promiscuity, right? Broken households. We now have upwards to 70% of the kids growing up without a father in the household or without two parents in the household. That is classified as a broken household. It's not to say you're an evil person, you're a bad person, you didn't try your best. That's just what it is, right? We know the effects of divorce. We know the effects of growing up with only one parent or not having, both parents involved in the child rearing. Again, folks do their best. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. But these are the facts. These are simply the facts. So you have a culture that actually uplifts single motherhood, baby mother culture. And it's not to say white folks aren't now doing the same things or haven't historically done this. We're talking about today, right now, what is impacting us in this moment, which is what I do my best to stay in. I use the historic context, but we still have to be honest about this moment, right? So we have a culture that has now promoted that. And yes, we have to talk about Lyndon Baines Johnson, and the perpetuation of disincentivizing women from having men in the households, etc. Right? Those things tie in, because some people like to get to Reagan and the war on drugs. And I say there was already a culture that was degenerating. It was falling apart. The drugs were just the fuel that lit the entire thing up. Right? The co-opting was just basically the perfect formula to have this thing have essentially like its ultimate implosion. But that was already coming, because the culture was already at a place where it was allowing for. That's why I always talk about the Democratic plantation mentality. The Democratic Party always looked to have Black folks back in shackles. The only difference is, instead of having the physical ones, because now that was outlawed, and also the mass of people would not have that, it was not going to be culturally acceptable. They changed their formula. They changed the way in which they showed up. And so now we have, I'm getting to the point. Now we have a culture that is okay with violent acts. Now we have a culture that is okay with the hookup culture, promiscuity, etc., that basically sees those things as normalized. Broken household. Therefore, it's a perfect recipe for this feminist manifesto, the feminist mentality, to come in and say a child is actually going to hold you back from all that you can be. Just like a relationship, a man is going to hold you back from all you can be. And not to leave out the fact that creator of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger herself, research this on your own time and look up the video that was shadow banned on my page, one of the earliest videos I put out, talking about the history of Planned Parenthood. And Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist. She believed in the eradication of the inferior races. Right? That's where the little mustache man actually got some of his ideas, and he hailed her as some sort of genius in that space. So she saw it as, necessary to push this message to Black women, as well as other quote unquote ethnic minorities, those who weren't part of the quote unquote Aryan race or the perfect species, specimen, etc. Right? So you have a culture that is now perfectly set up for these systems who are monetizing off of it, because don't ever get that twisted. The amount of money they're making in the baby unaliving business is unprecedented, is unbelievable. The billions upon billions of dollars that goes into this every single year. So where does systemic racism come in? The only system I see that's keeping folks honestly the most suppressed is the mentality of this dude right here, right? Billy Goat Bobby is what I'm going to call him right here.
You're saying more.
Is that white lady? White lady. Why do more black people get abortions?
The white liberal is one of the greatest hindrances to the forward progression of black folk, as well as themselves, because it's an individual thing. But as far as the external, quote unquote, it's those who continue to tell you can't do it, you can't, make it happen, the system's against you, blah, 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 blah. All of this externalizing your own agency as opposed to bringing it back to your own personal choices. That's the most destructive thing right here, right now in this modern day. And that's why I continue to point out the foolishness of the so-called progressive left, because they are what is left in the way. And I'm not saying Republicans can't be racist, etc. Anybody can be racist no matter where, color, creed, etc. It don't matter. What I'm getting to is these people are exhibiting the truest version of systemic racism. They're systemically creating all of these excuses to keep you in the very same place where basically you remain a victim. And the longer you remain a victim, the longer the problem is going to perpetuate. That's how that works. And so you will continue to see it as okay to unalive your own babies. I did videos on women celebrating unaliving their own babies, making cakes for it, talking about F this baby outside of the damn clinic, drinking, F this baby, F this baby. Those are the types of things and the types of sentiments. And I mean, we could get into conversations about the pill and how that's deregulating, estrogen and overall hormones. And, women are becoming more masculine upon those, etc. So you become more far removed from your actual natural tendencies of wanting to protect a child. We can have those conversations, but at the very fundamental baseline of it, it's culture. It's a culture that's okay with this, that promotes this, that still sees this as, well, it's not problematic. If you went to, China during the time where they were trying to decrease their population, and you weren't allowed to have a daughter, you literally had to unalive your baby girl if it was going to be a girl. That was a systemic thing. They said, we need to stop we need to cut the population. And so they put that in systemically. And so the very same thing is happening right now. And so we have to make decisions at the individual level. Am I going to continue to add to this system, or am I going to be responsible over myself? Why do we continue to use, or why do they continue to use this as a form of birth control? Shout out to whoever left that in my comments. Like, what's that about? You do understand that there are other forms of, or you can just, keep your legs closed. That works too. Men and women. That's a choice. So yeah, I'm done with this conversation. I'm not done. Like, I'm gonna refute it wherever it comes up, but he thought he was cooking for real. All he was doing was keeping folks right where they lay, right where they stay. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Now, if you'd like to stay around, make sure to click that little subscribe button down there, or you can show some love by going to the description below and clicking on the button titled Buy Me a Coffee. Leave a little something there, or click on the Cash App. Leave a little something here. Till the next time, peace.
I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with full moon. I fell in love with the night. I can see the light again. I can see the light. You can see the life in him illuminate the night. I know the time is taking. A 365, that's a full rotation. I see you looking up, you know them constellations. Constantly gazing like house of praises, you get to praising.